Hello, this is the Vegans of Bozeman on KGVM. We are a community group committed to environmentalism, human health, and redefining our relationship to other animals. We hope through this show to inspire you to live vegan for the same reasons. I'm Kevin.
I'm Sarah.
I'm Lucy. So today we'd like to talk about eggs. As vegans, we're often asked this question, why are we opposed to eating or using eggs? Especially backyard eggs. Often people are quite confused about that. So we wanted to talk a little bit about this today.
Yeah, I'm really excited about this show.
Yeah, me too.
I feel like the more we researched, the more we read and watched things, I realized how amazing chickens are.
Yeah.
Right.
And the timing of this show, I think, is really perfect. We are currently in the month of May, and I learned that May is actually International Chicken Appreciation Month.
Wow.
So
That's
this is
very awesome.
really good timing. I also like the timing because here in Bozeman in May, we enjoy the return of the birds who migrated away last fall because we have pretty harsh winters, and a lot of the birds leave for the entire winter. And so it's really, I think a lot of people really enjoy watching the birds come back. And so one of my goals for this show is if we could just make the connection between the birds we love and chickens. I think there's a real disconnect in our minds between enjoying and watching birds out in the wild and then the chickens that we eat or the chickens who produce the eggs that we eat. The more you research, the more you realize, no, they're not different. They're completely the same in terms of their personality and their curiosity and their behaviors, the way they love to raise their young and protect their young. So yeah, I think for a few reasons, this is a really, really good timing. And on that subject, I was really reminded, I think I've mentioned on this show that I'm an elementary school teacher, and a few years ago, one of my students' moms had a pair of robins build their nest like right under their deck at their house. And so they were able to hook up a camera under their deck so that you could watch every stage of the robins building their nest, laying their eggs, incubating the eggs, sitting on the eggs. And then you could watch, using this link, you could log in and see, oh my goodness, the first egg has hatched. And one by one, the eggs hatched. And then it became like a 12-hour-a-day job of both dad and mom to feed those little hatchlings. They were just flying away, coming back with food, flying away, coming back with food, like all day long. And then, they started getting their feathers and being more active. And again, just the fact that we're able to watch this from a foot away online, and then watching how one by one they each took their first step out of the nest, took the plunge and started to fly away. It was just really beautiful. It was really fun to watch that. And, those two robin parent moms were just so faithful to their babies. And so once again, when you start learning about chickens and their ancestors, and you start learning about their behaviors, you find that all birds are kind of the same in that regard. So,
Very interesting.
yeah.
I know we have a lot of bird watchers in the area, and they really love, especially go to the park, but even just around Bozeman, there's so many bird varieties that you can see. So yeah, they're very active, and I know people really start coming out with their binoculars and checking out all the birds. Yeah, anyway.
So I was really interested to learn about who are the modern chickens' ancestors. How did we end up with this species of birds known as Gallus domesticus? That's the taxonomy of the modern day chicken. Well, it may or may not surprise you, the listener, I certainly didn't grow up learning this. That our modern day understanding of what a chicken is the result of basically hundreds of years, but very intensely in modern times. It's very selective breeding, genetic manipulation to get to what we now understand to be the chicken. So where did they come from? Basically, their ancestors are what are called jungle fowl, and they are indigenous specifically to Central Asia or Southeast Asia. So we're thinking India, Java, Sri Lanka. So these are jungle fowls, and they are in the family of pheasants. So again, with taxonomy, they are from what are called the pheasant family. So
Right, and when you see them, I mean, they look close to a pheasant. I mean, they don't look like the chicken that we know today in America that people eat, but they do resemble the pheasant. So pheasants are so beautiful, especially when you see them around here. It's really nice. But
yeah, so that's a real connection for us to just start thinking in terms of how beautiful our local pheasant are. These are similar. When you see them, when you see footage of these jungle fowls, and there are green, gray, red, and Sri Lankan jungle fowls who are all kind of used as the ancestors of the modern day chicken. So again, I think one of the first things that I realized was just like the pigs that we are so familiar with in this country today, or the cows that we're so familiar seeing around in this country, chickens as well are not indigenous to this hemisphere, to this continent. They, just like all the animals that we use in animal agriculture, they're not indigenous at all. They were brought here by colonizers, which I think is just an important thing to kind of remember, that, depending on how you feel about colonization, it's just good to remember that these animals weren't here naturally. So they did start being kind of domesticated or bred, I guess. First of all, it was not for meat or for eggs, but sadly for cockfighting back in Asia thousands of years ago.
That's crazy.
Yep.
Yeah. So the idea that the males were captive, and used to basically as a sport or a hobby to for people to bet on and make money, where they were forced basically to fight to the death. And we know that before the time of Christ, about 2,000 years before Jesus, these jungle fowl had spread or had been brought to as far as the Middle East and North Africa. There's evidence that they were in ancient Egypt, a few thousand years before Christ. And from there, they were spread into Europe, where more and more they were selectively bred for more and more for meat and for eggs. So what I came away from, especially from watching a video on YouTube about jungle fowl, is just how beautiful they are. I mean, they really, I'm not exaggerating at all. I just was left with these are beautiful, majestic birds. In their natural habitat, they're just wonderful to watch. They're always foraging for food. They love to scratch and find food. They're drinking out of streams and rivers. They mate and they breed between February to May each year. So once again, if we think about, just in the back of your mind, keep the modern day chicken, the modern day egg-laying chicken in mind, because naturally their ancestors would breed at a very specific time of the year, and they would lay eggs just like all other birds, they lay eggs specifically to reproduce, to have babies. So they would breed between February and May. and then they would lay a clutch of eggs. Depending on if we're talking about the green or the gray or the red, some of them lay between 4 to 7 eggs a year, or between 10 to 12 eggs a year. So again, contrasting that with today's modern hen, there's a big difference between 12 eggs a year at a very specific time of year to what we've done with.
And what is that? It's about 269, 270 eggs a year. The modern day egg laying chicken, the industrialized operation.
So depending on your source, I've seen 269 a year, up to 320.
That's crazy.
Eggs a year.
Yeah, and we'll get into what that does to them physiologically. But anyway, so yeah, to think about that, a normal natural born chicken might lay 10 to 12 eggs a year, maybe no more than 20 eggs a year at a specific time of year, February to May. And our modern day chickens are laying eggs daily all year long. So anyway.
But they pair up just like our birds here in Bozeman are doing this time of year. They pair up, they mate, then they make a nest, and the hen will begin to lay her clutch of eggs. So over the succession of a few days after they've mated, she will lay, between, like we said, 4 to 12 eggs over the period of a few days. And then she will sit on them and incubate them. And while she's doing that, the rooster, the male, is kind of on a nearby branch, keeping guard over her and over the eggs against predators, because they are very vulnerable to predators. So the male watches over her and helps her out with that way. And then they hatch, and then of course you see the parents showing the chicks how to find food.
I have a little story that I just found in a book that's really cool that I recommend. It's The Inner World of Farm Animals by Amy Hadcoff. And they were talking about little stories from sanctuaries, and this one hen was at a sanctuary where her chicks were out in the open, and there was a hawk that just came around. All the hens noticed and obviously went for cover. And the chicks, obviously, they're too young. They haven't been taught yet that it is a danger. And so they don't know they don't react at all. They were just like hanging out. And so the mother hen went to them in the open while the hawk was circling overhead, and she put them under herself. And I don't remember exactly. I'll find it again. But it's like this person, I think is a writer, whatever. They were talking about how when they went outside, they were really terrified that this hen would be like just taken by the hawk, and they were struck by how brave basically this mother was for her chicks. And they said, well, if any human had done that, it would have made the headlines pretty much, because it's like a heroic act, right? It's an act of beautiful love, right? And it reminds me of how we tend to see other animals as like whatever they do is from instinct. It's not, and it's different than with us humans, because we humans are acting from love, for example. But you wouldn't see that hen acting from love, when really we kind of have to ask ourselves, what is really the difference there, right? Yeah. Between us and them. It's a really beautiful story, and maybe
Absolutely.
Shocked out,
we were talking about that this week, actually, Sarah and I, that even like I was reading another book, and it was talking about a scientist who actually he's the guy who figured out how bats use sonar to communicate and to navigate. And this same guy wrote a book in the 70s along the lines of, it had something to do with just animal awareness. And the whole scientific community came down on him and kind of called it pseudoscience. And basically, because it didn't fit in with their narrative. And so now, obviously, in the last decade, the last 15, 20 years even, we're becoming more aware of how amazing animals are, their capabilities, and recognizing their capabilities. And we can talk about that. I would love to have a show just talking about animals and their superpowers compared to us. We're always talking about intelligence and brains, and that's our one metric for
And
deciding.
even then, we actually are pretty ignorant. In
No,
what
I
they
know,
can
but I
do.
can't fly. I can't fly.
Yeah,
I'm
yeah.
not. I'm not high sense of sight and smell. As we're going to learn that chickens have both of those. So anyway.
It's really funny how there's just plenty of stories out of sanctuaries about chickens, but also other animals. Like, for example, a little, like 2 chicks who were brought up together, and then one dies and the other one's just depressed for months, kind of thing. I've heard countless stories of like these very strong social bonds that they form, just like humans, because they are social species. And it's always very powerful to read about, and it really shouldn't, because when you think about it, we are a social species as humans, right? And they are. So why would it be so freaking different? Right?
Yeah. It's almost like, I think of Occam's razor. Like, the simplest explanation is probably the truest explanation, and it's almost more convoluted and more difficult to convince yourself that the behaviors you're witnessing are not motivated out of love.
Right.
You know, that it's more difficult to believe, oh, that's just instinct. It's just automatic. They're on autopilot. They're not even thinking about. No, I mean, it makes so much more sense that, that they have feelings. They have desires of protecting their young.
And it feels a lot to me when I kind of hear this kind of discussion. It reminds me of kind of it sounds like a false dichotomy. It's like, do we act from nurture, or do we act from like nature? Why isn't it both? Like, because humans act out of love because of many reasons, but that doesn't mean that love is not there, right?
Right.
So it's just a very interesting conversation. I think.
Absolutely.
So we definitely wanted I think the next thing to kind of transition into is a little bit more about what scientists have been able to determine about chickens' intelligence, more about their social culture, their abilities. And, so we have determined that chickens are very intelligent. Specifically, they've been proven to perceive time intervals. They understand about the future. They understand about the past. They anticipate future events. That's been proven. They are able to recognize at least 100 individual faces. And that goes both for their fellow chickens as well as the humans around them.
That's crazy.
They've also done studies to show that they are able to recall locations of objects that have been hidden from them.
Right.
And they are very caring animals. They're able to experience joy and express joy, loneliness, frustration, fear, and pain. Interestingly, they've been proven to, like humans, have REM sleep, which means that they are able to dream like humans are. And I really love this one. Hens communicate with their chicks before they even hatch. So the hens will be vocalizing to their chicks who are still in the egg, and the baby chicks actually chirp back.
I know. That's so crazy. That's amazing. So yeah, they get to know their mom even before they see her.
And even their siblings, like they actually, like the noise that they hear from other chicks with them, like they recognize that when they're out and everything. And I've read also that it influences the moment that they hatch, like what they basically, the sounds that they make influence the time that their siblings will hatch. It's so crazy.
Wow.
It's just
That's amazing.
And their capabilities, like their intelligence, in some cases is better than infants. Like several months old humans in their first few days. So like.
That's what I heard. Like the fact that they can remember where things are. You said that they can remember, like if somebody takes something away or they cover it, they know it's there. They have that memory, and more so than even a human toddler.
That's right.
So.
Yeah. Human babies do not establish object permanence until several months old, which is why they freak out if their mom leaves the room. So.
just like human babies. Also, it's actually been shown that they can count.
Yes.
It's crazy.
That's right.
Well, yeah, I don't remember if it's chicks or actual adult chickens.
Yeah, watch out, AI. Chickens can count. You know what I'm saying?
So scientists have been able to establish that there are at least 24 separate distinct vocalizations with distinct meanings. And so, they have like I just laid an egg song, or, like a call for help or alert.
Yeah, and this is from a book called Metanomics, this quote, and it's very interesting. And this might be sound more powerful when we talk about, the industrialized egg production system. But here's a quote that says, "A free hen under attack uses a unique call to summon help from her rooster. Maybe because she doesn't want to dilute the call's efficacy by crying wolf, she never uses it for any other purpose. Cage battery hens make the same last resort call for help. This means the cacophony in a henhouse is much more than purposeless noise. It's actually the sound of thousands of distressed hens repeating a rescue call over and over." That's so sad.
It's heartbreaking.
Yeah.
We also know that the senses of a chicken are superior to that of humans. Specifically, their sense of sight is just better in so many ways, to the point where, a lot of people will ask, why do roosters start crowing while it's still dark outside? And the reason for that is that they are able to see infrared light. And so to them, it is light. It is getting light. So while we still perceive complete darkness, they are perceiving light.
We're wrong.
No, seriously. But that's true of other birds, too. They can see colors. They can see color frequencies that humans cannot see. Their eyes are way more developed. It's amazing.
Because they needed it.
Right.
Yeah, it did them well.
They also have a much superior sense of smell, and that's especially heartbreaking because, by all accounts, the industrial chicken enterprise, the egg industry, as well as the broiler chicken industry, the smell within those enormous sheds is overwheying.
Right. It's unbelievable.
And also hearing. They have amazing sense of hearing. And again, that's since they're originally from the jungle. At night when they all go up and they fly up into trees to roost, so they're off the ground during the night to protect them from predators. They can't really see each other through the foliage, and so they communicate with each other with their vocalization. So they're able to find each other and communicate with each other through this amazing sense of hearing.
Wow.
They've also been known to mourn the loss of their eggs. So when their eggs are taken from them, they will actually mourn that. And they're also very clean birds. They love to sit in the sun and bask in the sun and take dust baths.
Yep.
And they love to preen and keep themselves and their environment very clean.
Right. And they need their beaks to be able to do that, by the way.
Yeah.
And we'll learn. Yeah, is that what we're saying now? But
We might as well say it now
Okay.
that it's standard farming practice to debeak chicks without any painkiller, of course. And the beak is not, I wanted to comfort myself with the idea that, that's probably just like, trimming your fingernails or no.
Right.
The beak, if you think about it, they don't have hands to use for tactile, the sense of touch. And so their beak is their most sensitive part of their body, which they use to find food, to preen themselves, so many things. So there's a lot of nerve endings in that beak. And when they are debeaked by the industry, some of them die on the spot from shock. Some of them die very soon after because it's so painful they cannot eat and they cannot drink, and so they die of dehydration.
And let's talk about the debeaking. Like, what exactly is it?
It's like a red hot blade that just saws it off.
And they just hold the chick up to it, and it just like they just
Yep.
slice
They
it.
stick its little beak in this through this hole, and it clenches its little eyes shut as this thing just saws off their beak.
And the searing hot blade.
These
just-
are like infants.
Yeah.
These are like tiny babies.
And I would like to say, you know, the standard answer for why that has to be done is, well, in these confined situations, they start to self-harm with their beaks. They start to harm each other with their beaks because there's so much competition to try to move or, you know, turn around. Like they're so crowded and packed on top of each other that they start to harm each other. And I think that's very, very true. But another reason that isn't as said as much is that, and again, we're kind of jumping ahead a little bit here, but hens are so nutrient deficient from the heavy laying schedule that they're forced into that they're craving replenishment of those nutrients, specifically calcium, but also all the fat that they lose through the yolks of the egg. And so they naturally would eat their own eggs when they're that malnourished. And so when their beaks have been removed, there's no chance that they're going to be able to peck open that egg and gain back the nutrients. So it's just another way for the farmer to preserve the product.
Right. Oh, and also just getting back to it, like we were talking about, like when they cut the tip of this beak off, you know, they use that beak to drink water. They use it to forage for food. They use it to eat. And so now you have this like maimed beak that they might struggle to pick up food. They might struggle to drink, right? And one person compared it to, they said, even though to put it in perspective for a human, it's like if somebody cut your lips off and then cauterized the rest of your mouth, like burned your mouth to seal off the damage. And so imagine that. Imagine if you're trying to drink or eat or talk or make love with your lips cut off and then your face cauterized. I mean, it's just horrible. I mean, that puts it in perspective to some degree.
Right. So we kind of already started getting into some of the health consequences for hens with this overproduction, this unnatural amount of egg production. But one statistic that's just staggering is that a hen loses 10% of her bone calcium with every single egg that she lays. So per egg,
That's crazy.
she loses 10% of her bone calcium. And as we know, what do we know about birds' bones? They're already hollow.
Yeah. Yep.
That's how they're structurally designed, or that's how they're born, you know, to do what birds do. So they have hollow bones, and then on top of that, we're taking away 10% of their bone calcium every day when they lay their egg for us. And so as a result, as you can imagine, egg-laying hens have a very high frequency of having osteoporosis with the accompanying bone fractures.
Right, and if we put that in perspective, like we talked about the natural bird, it would lay eggs maybe in a clutch or two clutches a year between February and May. You know, and what we say, 4 to 12 eggs a year. And so for that period, they would lose that calcium for just that period, but then the rest of the year, their body would replenish. Whereas the industrialized hen-laying production, they're doing it daily. Some chickens are giving more than one egg a day. And so if you just think about that.
Yeah, year round.
Right. I mean, their bodies never get replenished.
Yeah, they lose feathers. They just look like, even when you look at footage of these, even free range chickens, like they look just terrible. And even if you don't know much about how a chicken looks like, you know it's wrong.
Oh,
Right.
Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah, they have open sores and infections, and they're losing all their feathers, and they can't even stand up, and there's because of broken bones. And and not only are they, we've emphasized that they're laying a much greater number of eggs a year, like 30 times what would be natural, but also we've selectively bred them and genetically manipulated them so that even the size of each egg is unnaturally large. So, that lends itself to so many more health problems with these hens, because actually releasing these eggs is a painful, long process that often goes badly. Like there's such a thing called egg binding, in which the egg becomes stuck inside the body of the hen, and she cannot get it out. There's all kinds of infections that come when the egg breaks inside of her and basically just starts rotting.
And it's also worth mentioning where the egg comes out.
Yeah, let's talk about that.
Let's talk about that. Let's just talk about.
Yeah.
Let's just talk about, because I mean, I wanted to mention, in these industrialized egg laying facilities, these cages are just one on top of the other, like maybe 5-6 cages high. So when they're going to the bathroom, they're just going to the bathroom on top of each other.
And free range as well, like they are always in their feces.
Free range as well. And then, of course, a lot of these birds have salmonella, and which, by the way, even the baby chicks. So when you're getting your children baby chicks for Easter, you just might want to be aware of the fact that you might be exposing your own children to salmonella. So, but the place where the egg comes out, let's talk about that. Let's talk about the sanitary conditions of an egg.
So bird anatomy, they're not from the same class of the animal kingdom as mammals, right? So their reproductive system looks different. Basically, they have, and it kind of sounds coarse, so I apologize, but they basically have one hole, one opening, and that hole serves for both reproductive functions as well as elimination of waste. So out of the same hole comes their urine and feces, their menstruation, which is an unfertilized egg, and it's also the hole through which they mate. So yeah, if you think about it, kind of in terms of like, imagine that an alien species came to this planet and we're interviewing a human and learned that for breakfast, we humans traditionally eat the menstruation that comes out of another species. It's when you really think about it, it might cause you a little pause to be like, oh, how natural is that?
Right.
So yeah, the number and size of eggs causes a lot of pain and health problems and shortens their lives dramatically. In the wild, they can live, I've heard, all the way up to 20 years, which seems like a long time. Whereas in the industry, whether they're the breeder chickens for egg-laying hens, or they're the broiler chickens, or they're the egg-laying chickens, 18 months of life is about before they're spent and sent to slaughter.
Also, this reminds me of, I've seen some photos of like in animal sanctuaries, like chickens and also other animals, when they grow old, they look wildly different from what people usually have in mind, because we have in mind very young animals. Like these animals that are in the industry, they are usually babies to adolescents at the oldest. And so we really only see them when they're super young. And have you ever seen an old hen or an old cow? Like it's pretty freaking rare, which is really disturbing.
Right.
Very disturbing. Yeah. So within, industrial chicken farms, chicken operations, the day length is manipulated. There are no windows and there's artificial light. Basically, just like all other birds, chickens are so in tune with the sun and how many hours of sunlight there are. And that determines, migratory patterns with our birds that just came back. Like the hours of sunlight, they're very in tune to that. That determines when they breed in the wild. Well, farmers have figured out one of the many ways that the chickens are manipulated is if they don't know what time of day it is, they will just lay more because, naturally they would lay in the morning and in the springtime and when there's a certain number of hours of sunlight. But when they're kept from the sun and they're confused, they have no idea what time of year or what time of day it is, they actually end up laying more eggs. So it's pretty sad. I mean, I feel like we're saying that a lot, but it's pretty sad that we create such an unnatural environment for them.
Right. And it's worth noting that if you eat eggs, even if you want to say you're a vegetarian and you don't eat chicken, you don't eat meat, but you eat eggs, you're really still contributing to this whole catastrophe and all this abuse. And
they end up being killed in the end. Same way.
Right. And it's basically torture. I mean, from the moment they're born.
You could argue that it's worse because it's for longer.
It is for longer, yeah. And it's like a hell on earth. It really is.
And also just, I mean, a lot of people might think that free-range eggs are much better for the hens, but turns out when you really look into that stuff, it ends up just being marketing terms to make consumers feel better about buying those things. It only means they're not in cages, but then they're just trampling each other in a big building. And because of the pecking order, it becomes actually more dangerous in some ways and more horrific for the hens. Right. And also there's the whole thing with roosters attacking, the hens in nature, the hen would be able to escape, for example, if she was attacked by a rooster. But like in these buildings, there is no way to escape, and they kind of go crazy anyway. So it's not much better.
No, and the industry takes advantage of the law. They basically, I guess the law says that they just need to have a door to the outside, and so they have these little doors that they can go out. But many people have said they never go out. I think probably for protection, also because they're very social creatures. And they stay inside. Or
they're incapable of making their way through the bodies on top of bodies on top of bodies in their state. In fact, the lawsuit that's going up against Costco chickens right now is because they had this type of cageless situation where they were all on the floor in their feces. And so the feeding systems just kind of run down the center of the shed. Well, the majority of those chickens are so sick, as it's so crowded, they have no chance of ever getting to the water or getting to the food. So they're dying of dehydration, they're dying of starvation. So these marketing phrases and images that make us feel like, these are happy hens. And, there's no law against them showing these hens out on the grass on the packaging when these hens have never once touched grass.
Right.
Also, there's plenty of footage. I've always been quite surprised by that. When investigators go in free-range facilities, for example, and of course that works for factory farms as well, they go in there and they find just a bunch of dead birds there, just among the living ones, because they just grow up.
Well, that's it. I was reading about that too, that it's so much cheaper for these farmers or these industrialized farmers to just let the birds die versus giving them care. It actually costs more money to care for them. And so I think they average like $3 a bird. And so it would cost them way more money to bring a vet in to treat them.
However, 80%, as we know, 80% of antibiotics that are used in this country are given to livestock, and that's also true of chickens. They're so pumped full of antibiotics, which you are consuming when you eat their eggs or their flesh.
And let's talk about that. The reason they're given antibiotics, I think the main reason, it may be to keep them healthy, but it's really because it makes them grow faster. Mm-hmm. And so we're in some ways misusing antibiotics. And some are saying, when we talk about pandemics, books have been written on this. Some are saying the next big pandemic is going to be some kind of avian flu. But on top of that, we're going to reach a point where antibiotics no longer have any effectiveness for humans. Mm-hmm. So that's something to consider when we're overusing them for animal agriculture.
Yeah, and without even taking into account the natural hormones that go through a chicken's body, like even the natural even if you would, I mean, we'll talk later about the backyard chickens a little bit, but even if it's an animal who did not have antibiotics their whole life, you're still eating their natural hormones and their natural stress or whatever things, like it's something to consider as well.
trauma.
Can we actually ingest those safely, and can we actually regulate those in our bodies as humans?
Right.
So a couple more things to mention about the state or the quality or lack thereof of life with the modern farmed chicken. They, like we already mentioned, so many infections. They have blinding eye disease because of the ammonia burn in the fumes, the very poor, the basically toxic air. They have fatty liver disease because of basically their livers just wear out producing this many eggs. Because of the egg production, their other organs are forced to be smaller and in smaller amounts of spaces, so their other organs fail. Once they reach about 9 to 12 months of this schedule of laying eggs daily, they start to become less productive, and so then the farmers will put them through forced molting, which is basically they starve. They deny the chickens any food or water, which shocks their system into laying more and more eggs. And they'll do that to the birds like sometimes 2 to 4 times. And then by that time, they're just completely spent.
And they do it for about 2 weeks. For 2 weeks, they just starve the birds. And then the physiological response of the bird is it produces more eggs. And I think the industry standard, they did some experiments, and they can do it about 2 times in the life of the bird. When they start to get to 3 or 4, sometimes it works, but a lot of times the birds end up just giving up.
So a lot of these hens don't make it to getting sent to slaughter. They die for so many other reasons before that. But if they still are alive at that point, they're just sent to slaughter. But their bodies are so broken and their flesh is so bruised that they basically have to be shredded, and then they're only fit for, in terms of going to market, they become pet food or, canned chicken soup at that point.
And they're also fed to other. They're basically made into a meal. They take these spent chickens, they grind them up into this mash, and then they actually feed it back to chickens and other animals. They put it in, like I said, chicken soup, and I guess dog food too.
And cat food.
And cat food.
One thing we cannot neglect to mention is if you think about every egg-laying hen in existence, there would be, a sibling, another egg, that was fertilized and hatched and was a male chick. Well, within the egg industry, males are waste products. They have no purpose. They're not worth raising for meat because the breeds of egg-laying chickens don't really have the amount of meat on them that any consumer would want. So at the hatcheries, the males are killed basically their first day of life, and they're done and they're killed in the most cost-effective way, which means they're mass killed, and usually that means they're macerated. They're put on a conveyor belt that drops them into a macerator that just grinds them alive.
Oh, spinning blades, yep. Or they're gassed with CO2.
Yeah, or what's even just as common is they're just thrown into garbage bags.
Right, they suffocate.
And they suffocate in the dumpster.
Right. And that is worth mentioning that the industry for broiler hens, or the meat chickens that people eat, is a different, I guess, pathway, a different industry than the egg laying industry. And so the birds that are basically genetically modified for food, for meat, are one bird. And so roosters are male chicks that are born in the egg laying side of the business are waste product. They're basically so. And some say, I was reading that chickens, they're pretty much equal. They lay as many female eggs as they do male eggs.
Sure.
And so if you think about that, that is massive. And so one question to ask when you're eating your eggs is, where's the brother?
Yeah, exactly.
And when it comes to maceration, this is actually considered one of the most humane practices to dispose of these chicks. Each time someone watches this footage, I've never seen anyone not being absolutely shocked and horrified by it. It's worse than a horror movie. It's incredible. Like, literally just a blender. It's a blender. And the reason the reason they do it is also because it's fast, but even if it takes you a couple of seconds to be shredded into pieces, obviously no one would ever want to face that death. And these are, again, like, when we remember, everybody loves chicks, right? They're tiny, they're cute, they're adorable, they're completely defenseless, and they're babies. So when you see a little chick in real life, you just want to protect it. You want to be very delicate with it. You want to pet it. And just imagining these very sensitive, tiny baby creatures just being blended up for really no real necessity.
Yeah.
It's hard to think of anything that could make this necessary, but...
Well, and it's also as a result of that, because the farmers know, or the industrialized farms know, that they're going to get a bunch of male chicks that are going to be worthless to them. They do kind of slightly raise the prices of the eggs that they're producing to sort of compensate. And that gets into a whole nother arena that we can talk about in another show, is just the whole checkoff program for the U.S. government and the agriculture industry. How, consumers are probably not paying the real price of meat and eggs and dairy that they're being.
But we are through our taxes.
We are through our taxes, correct.
To fund the subsidies.
Some of it, yes.
Yeah.
Also, something to mention, I'm sure you guys can offer more information about this than me. When people get little chicks through the mail and everything, I guess that goes more into the backyard hen situation.
Yeah, we could definitely transition because obviously there are, when you consider the living conditions of the industrial, the factory type farms for chickens, seeing chickens living in someone's backyard, comparatively, quality of life clearly is improved, right? They're able to be out in the sun. They're able to be out on the grass. They're able to forage for food. They're able to spread their wings and preen and, just do so many more of their natural behaviors. So again, lots of times people will ask vegans, well, what about backyard eggs? What could possibly be wrong with that situation? So that could be a stumper for a vegan to know how to respond to that. But I think some of the things that we've been talking about still apply, even to the backyard situation.
Right.
Specifically, where did these hens come from? Basically, almost always, unless they've been rescued out of the system, they were purchased, money was paid for them, and they came from the breeder chickens who lead very miserable lives, very short, painful, miserable lives. So first of all, the parents are probably were miserable and are now dead. Their brothers, as we've already mentioned, were killed. And money was paid. So again, they're considered property. They're considered products. They're considered kind of like we're using them for what they can provide us. They're just a commodity.
Well, also they're probably still laying eggs. I mean, we know people who have these backyard farms, and they're getting a few eggs a day, right? Mm-hmm. And so these chickens are still producing more eggs than they normally would. And the other thing is, a lot of these coops that people can buy, there's something out there called a chicken tractor that you can buy, and it's a movable coop. It's on wheels, because I guess when the chickens are in there, they kind of start scratching at the edges and removing some of the dirt. And so what they do is they move these coops around. And what's happening is they're not temperature controlled. So we live in Montana, and it gets pretty dang cold here, even in April sometimes, right? April and October. I mean, we have a short window growing season, a short summer, and they're not temperature controlled. Number two, they're not really good protection against predators. Several people, and we know people who've had these things, these chicken tractors or coops, and raccoons have gotten in and killed the chickens. And it's just, I mean, we're not even talking like coyotes, or not coyotes, but foxes, right? You typically think of the fox robbing the chicken coop, but raccoons go in there and they will kill the birds.
Also, what we mentioned already earlier, that chickens actually, in their natural environment, when they are left to their own devices, they will eat the eggs that are not fertilized to replenish themselves, and they need that to actually stay okay. And so what they'll do in animal sanctuaries is that they will give them birth control so that they don't lay as many eggs, because they've been manipulated to lay way more eggs than they actually can handle. And also they will, when they do lay eggs, they will obviously just leave the eggs to them so that they can replenish themselves. And yeah. Oh, what you guys know, especially about the mailing orders of chicks, etc.? Because I've heard some interesting things about that.
Yeah, a lot of them I've heard they get injured, they get squashed. I mean, a lot of times these companies that move boxes, things are not always well taken care of, and so sometimes when people open the box, in fact, I was reading a story where a woman opened a box, she got mail order chicks. When she opened the box, all the chicks were dead. Like all of them, because part of it was this actually happened during COVID. The U.S. Postal Service was being delayed. I guess, remember during COVID, all the delivery companies were being delayed, and things were sitting in trucks like on the highway for days. And so what happened was when they send these chicks through the mail, I think they're expecting that it would only take 3 to 5 days for the chicks to get through and that they'll survive. But if they take longer than that, and let's just imagine during COVID, trucks were on the highway or just staged in certain areas for days, and let's just say it was really hot and or cold, depending on the weather. I mean, these animals are going to suffocate. They're going to get heat exhaustion, or they're going to freeze.
Without water, without food.
Water, yeah, exactly. So
limited oxygen.
Absolutely. Too. And so, exactly, this woman that she ordered these chicks, they got stuck in that whole system. They got delayed, and then when she opened her box, all the chicks were gone.
So in these hatcheries, when they mail out boxes of chicks to people, they will always mail a greater quantity of chicks than what was ordered, because they know that some of them, at least, are going to die in transport, and they just consider it extra packing material.
Right.
So,
and also, well, these hatcheries, a lot of people think that, well, if I get my eggs from a humane farmer or something, they don't come from these hatcheries, but they all do. Like, these hatcheries actually, they give the chicks to American humane certified farms as well. So it's also something to remember.
Right.
Right. And that's the funny thing. The industry itself sometimes comes up with these words, humane. Mm-hmm. They come up with these industry. In fact, I went to a local ranch store here in Bozeman. I went to their website just to see what kind of chickens you could order. And while I was there, a thing popped up and said, enter your email to learn how to take care of your healthy and happy chicks. And I was just like, okay. I mean, this is what they're always trying to talk about, happy, healthy chicks and humanely raised animals.
Because they know that people have sensitivities to that. We're true predators. We should not feel this way, right?
Exactly.
Yeah, I always think when people are throwing around the word humane around these animals that are clearly suffering, I think it was maybe Jane Goodall who, I don't know why I think that, but I think she's the one that said, before you call something humane, the true measure of how humane something is should be, would I like that to happen to me? Would I like that to happen to my children? Would I like that to happen to my beloved dog or whatever? And if the answer is no, then it's really not humane at all. I don't think that most people wake up in the morning and are uncaringly making purchases that support suffering. I don't believe that. I believe that most of us don't want to contribute to cruelty to animals. I think it's just we've intentionally been misled. We've intentionally been misinformed. And so that's what the purpose of a show like this is trying to do, is to help us be more well informed about what our grocery shopping dollars are supporting. Because when we know better, we can actually start to do better.
Also, something that's interesting to talk about is the number of chickens compared to the other animals that are being, exploited in the industry.
Yeah. Well, hey, I mean, there's a lot to talk about here. We could have many shows on this, and so
Well, just to wrap it up, basically, most of the animals that are being exploited, especially in the U.S., are chickens.
right,
Oh, yeah.
I mean, in the
Millions.
food industry. Yeah.
right, absolutely.
Always more to say, but I think that's
Well,
enough for one
it is.
day.
Hey, well, thank you for joining us. And this,
Check out our Facebook with our events, free events. You're welcome to come.
Vegans of Bozeman.
Vegans of Bozeman. All right.
Thank
Take
you,
care.
everybody.
Bye.
Bye.